Hi, State Representative Sheryl Delozier. I'm here with the CEO of the YWCA of Greater Harrisburg, Mary Quinn. And today we had a press conference, and Mary added so much information about what the YWCA does for our area here in Harrisburg, and the ability for us to understand how prevalent the idea between human trafficking is, and to recognize the fact that here in Pennsylvania, we need to be more aware of what human trafficking is. Mary, thank you very much for being here at the press conference and for what the Y does to our area. Can you explain a little bit about the services that you provide in our corridor here in central Pennsylvania?
Sure. Well, the YWCA has been providing services here in the Greater Harrisburg community for over 125 years. We're most notably known for our victim services that relate to domestic violence, sexual assault, and most recently human trafficking. As part of those services, we are also able to offer legal services for victims as well. We run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
It's wonderful to be able to know that there's a service available in our community no matter when the crisis occurs. When you talk about human trafficking, what experience have you had within, you've been able to get a federal grant in order to, again, educate people and also provide services to victims. Can you talk about what you've seen here in our area?
So we have identified 293 victims since the inception of our grant. Our grant started as just wanting to build more awareness, helping people understand the definition of human trafficking, being force, fraud, or coercion, and then in terms of bystanders, helping them build that awareness to when they see something, say something, and report it. From that, we were surprised at how many victims we were able to identify along the Route 15 corridor that runs from the state of New York to the state of Maryland. 75% of those were identified within the Harrisburg area that we actually sit in, and many of those victims are brought to us through law enforcement.
And many times one of the issues that we talked about at the press conference is who is a victim, because many times people think of it as somebody that they'll never come into contact with, somebody, many times when the DA that spoke, DA Sunday, spoke about the fact that many judges and juries who hear these cases have no concept as to what human trafficking is. So can you explain what kind of victims? It doesn't matter who you are, what echelon you come from in your community, your religious backgrounds. It's so diverse. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So all of our victims have been a very diverse background, from white, African American, Latina. We see different ethnicities, different religions, ages, genders, so children, adults. We have seen a broad span of coming from all walks of life. Unfortunately, there is this conception that victims are kind of taken off the street. We've kind of sensationalized this with a lot of Hollywood movies.
Different movies you've seen, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, these are the individuals who won't be missed in society. They already have perhaps a criminal history, perhaps their immigration status is not certain, and they're scared to come forward and report a crime. They are underage, or they have an addiction. Trafficking, the perpetrators of human trafficking control these individuals through their addiction, or withholding medical care, or withholding food. And so they are all around us. It's just understanding what that looks like, and being able to respond and call the hotline when you see something.
And raising awareness is what today was about. We're passing a package of bills to change the thought process about human trafficking. And a lot of people don't think about it, not only because they don't come in contact with it, which is fine, and that's good. Obviously, we don't want that. But unfortunately, the ability for us to understand and change the dialogue that it's not the person, and it can be a man, woman, or a child, that is committing the sex act. It is the person that's forcing them to do that. It is the person that's asking for those services. So we want to change the conversation to say it's not the person that's the person is possibly having sex with, but they're being forced to do so. So changing that parameter and changing the laws to reflect that is so very important. And I know your interaction with victims in and of themselves, they don't recognize necessarily that they are a victim. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's absolutely correct. They have experienced such complex trauma, and those, impact their judgment and even something.
And that's why they become a victim many times. Is it not because they are weak or they aren't as self-assured or they don't have resources or family or a strong support system? So many times, perpetrators see that weakness and they go after that.
Yep, there is a grooming that happens, and people know the weakest ones in the herd to be able to target, and unfortunately,
It works too easily.
yes, and that's what we mean when we say they're the ones that won't be missed, and that's a sad reality for our society, and building this awareness is huge to help them. And I think the other piece that we have seen, like you said, we're victim advocates, so we're used to wanting our mission to be empowering the victim. So the victim is right. In every decision that they make, it is their choice. We have not always had the same viewpoint with law enforcement because they're there to investigate a crime. I have seen huge leaps and bounds with law enforcement, even in my time at the YW, understanding and realizing that it's not the victim that should be punished. Certainly there are things that need to be addressed and justice needs to be served. We're not saying that at all. But it is the person who is holding that person. It is the person who's trafficking that person, and it is the person who's willing to pay for it. That's where I think we interrupt the cycle of human trafficking and the trauma, because it's a huge billion-dollar business outpacing drug trafficking. And the fact that we have had such a wonderful working relationship with law enforcement now, for them to arrest someone and then start asking the right questions, realizing, there is a much bigger issue going on here, and we can actually create solutions that result in somebody having hope and being saved and being a part of society.
Well, thank you very much for giving us that side of it, because many times people don't think about what happens after. And the DA was talking about just that, in the sense that they were originally arresting someone and they still had consequences to pay, obviously, for the crimes that they had committed outside of the sex trafficking and the fact of the whole situation. So there's a bigger picture to this. And so law enforcement and the DAs, when they're prosecuting, have been educated much more, and just like we are being educated, and just like the public needs to be educated. So thank you for taking the time to be here today. And share some insights, because the more we educate people with any issue dealing with victims, but sex trafficking is one that people know even less about, unfortunately. So thank you for being here. The ability for us to make sure that trafficking is changing the way we think about what is sex trafficking. The laws that we are going to pass in the House and hopefully send over to the Senate and pass there and get to the governor's desk are very, very important in changing the idea of what is sex trafficking here in Pennsylvania. Thank you very much.